door again, or my dog opens the door.
Perfect.
So thank you so much, gorgeous souls, for joining me for another one of my podcast episodes today. I am so delighted to have the wonderful Bianca Best with us. So Bianca, if you don't know, she is a woman of impact. She is an award-winning global business leader, best-selling author, founder and CEO of the Burnout Business and Energyscape Method, certified coach, keynote speaker, and solo parenting mother of four, passionately eradicating the world's burnout epidemic at scale. Welcome to the show, Bianca. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Oh, I am so excited for today's conversation because as a business owner myself, I know the feeling of burnout is something I have absolutely battled over the years. So I can't wait to pick your brain and ask you all the questions for myself. But I know that so many people, whether they've got a business or not, are going to be so interested in this episode to find out your top tips and tools and how we can feel more in flow and feel more magnetic to abundance and to the universe as well. But before we dive into all of that, Bianca, I would love to ask you a question that I ask every single guest. When did you spiritually awaken? What is your story?
Oh, that's such a lovely, juicy, rich question. And do you know what? When I think about spiritual awakening, I believe it's a permanent process. And I have been awakening really since, well, I'm going to say since I was a child. I was very interested in spirituality from as young as 12. I was meditating and trying to connect into my extrasensory perception. But I really do believe that we are cycling round our own evolution in life, going from creatorship, sustaining, destroying in the void, and then we create and go round and round in these cycles. And each cycle of life, each chapter, we're just expanding. And part of that expansion is around our spiritual awareness, our spiritual awakening. So I would say it comes in sort of forces of density where suddenly there's more of a spiritual awakening. And right now, at a transformational moment in my own life, I'm definitely in one of those awakening periods again right now. So I could say now, but I'm going to
Yeah.
say forever and always.
It's definitely one of those ever unfolding journeys. So you mentioned that obviously you were really interested in spirituality from the age of 12.
Yeah.
So what has that looked like over the years? Is it something that you practice daily? Is it something that you kind of turn to in those moments of, when our life does go through those awakening moments? Like, how does spirituality fit into your life and into your beliefs?
So if I think about what spirituality actually means to me, it's around having this trust in the divine, in a power greater than ourselves. And I've believed that from childhood. I was raised by a mother that was naturopathic and holistic in all her attitudes and approaches, and I really adopted that. So at the age of 12, I would go to the library and I would get hypnotherapy cassettes. I'm that old. And I would come home and play my little cassette on whatever it was I wanted to learn and expand, because I just believed if I went into my subconscious that I would be tapping into some kind of divine force and therefore I would grow. So as a child, that would be like better posture, because I wanted to go to school with my back straight, stuff like that. And by the age of 16, I was reading tarot cards. And when I went to sixth form college, I was the girl that was reading everyone's tarot cards. And I used to regularly go to a spiritualist church, and I used to go to the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival way back when I was really young and only just learning how to even get trains. But what's interesting is I think about that spiritual journey as I met my now ex-husband. I was only 18 when I met him. I started work. I was going to take a gap year between A levels and university, but I ended up working and met my husband. So I was 18, suddenly living in a house with 25-year-olds in the corporate world. And suddenly that was more important. Suddenly I wasn't journaling. Suddenly I was embarrassed that I did tarot cards. Suddenly that all sort of shut down.
Mm.
And that stopped for me because I was invested in this other new exploratory life and exploratory growth moment. But when I was 27 years old and my first baby was born, suddenly that all came flooding back in. And I described the birth of my first son as a moment of going, suddenly the universe makes sense. I get why I'm here. and life became about love, joy, and nurturing this little soul. And during that phase, I reconnected with my journaling and I started to reconnect with myself. Still not as abundantly as I did as a child. And then I really think I spent the next 10 years or so just peeling away layers of the mask that I had put on to help me survive in life. And that's a lot of the work that I do now around avoiding burnout, is around peeling off these masks, because I believe that as we step into more certainty and trust in the spiritual realm, we start to settle our nervous systems and we're better able to navigate this physical realm. So that's been an intrinsic part of my journey to thriving and achieving ambitions without falling over, which is very much my what I talk about and teach today. So I started to really become more spiritual. I started to notice things like diet would impact spirituality. So the cleaner my diet became, the cleaner my intuition became, and all sorts like that. So it's amazing what we can tap into and what too many of us don't, sadly.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, how did we go from that version of Bianca to the Bianca we see today with all of the incredible bestseller titles, your book, and obviously teaching people about burnout? How did we get here?
Well, sadly, because I did burn out a lot, and I've always been incredibly ambitious and leaned into passions. I describe my CV as a chronology of passions explored. And I've always reached for the stars and generally achieved them, manifested what I've wanted because I've been intentional and worked hard and applied that energy, focus, and attention very determinedly. So I've always achieved. But what started to happen is I started to slam into walls where I would experience burnout. And these burnouts became worse and worse until at my peak in my mid 30s, I was hospitalized for total immune collapse. And the pattern that I was in was very much around achieving a goal. I ran a business. I was only 27 when I launched my first business. It was a personalized gift business. And that grew from the seeds of an idea and me being a mummy with a buggy knocking on doors, going, take me seriously, let me launch this business, to a huge personalized gift empire that I ran for 10 years. Throughout that period, I had another child, then I had twins. So at one point, I had 4 children under 7 and was running this international gift business that was omni-channel. I had concessions in Debenhams, I was in WH Smith, like every online retailer. I was making all these products, selling millions of pounds worth of personalized gifts every year. But I was trying to do all this whilst being a full-time mummy, because I had a warped belief that if I had childcare, that I would somehow be failing as a mum. So I had all these different parts of me trying to do it all, and I'd started to subscribe to this myth that having it all meant doing it all. So despite the fact that I was burning out, I tended to totally collapse, and then I'd just get better and get back up on the treadmill and do it again and again. And of
Mm.
course, that's not sustainable. And it was certainly impacting the people around me, because every time I crashed, I wouldn't get a common cold like everyone in the house would have cold. I would get full blown flu and be in bed for 2 weeks and just out, absolutely out. And then friends, family, colleagues, everyone would have to pick up the work. I was no good to anybody. So this cycle was unsustainable, and I started having to really learn, well, how can I self-manage without shrinking my dreams? I don't want to not have a thriving business or have a successful corporate career. I don't want to not be having the lifestyle that I lead. I don't want to not see all my friends or exercise all the time. So I had to really work out how to be me without falling over. And that was the big lesson that I learned over a decade or so. And bit by bit, I got better and better and better. And 2015 was the last time that I burnt out. And now I'm in this realm of sustaining success with grace, as I describe it.
Mm. Love that. Love that. Always got to have a bit of grace. So, for anybody wondering what burnout is or even what that looks like, can you explain to us what burnout is and why this is a global epidemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Burnout was classified as a global epidemic back in 2019 by the World Health Organization. So they had come to recognize that this is significantly impacting the global economy, cultures, societies all over the world. And that was before the pandemic.
Mm,
And then the pandemic whooshed in and things got even worse. And so now we're at a catastrophic point in terms of the statistics worsening year on year. People are burning out at a ridiculous rate. It tends to be women around 60%, men around 40%. Both are awful. Women tend to be higher because we still do 68% of the domestic and emotional labor at home. So there's more pressure on our shoulders. But the statistics are worsening, they're not bettering, and it's impacting the economy, the global economy, to the tune of around $1 trillion a year. So it really is a crisis that is sadly worsening. So the work that I'm doing is really trying to mitigate how we support individuals and thus collectively society as a whole to mitigate against burnout. The way it tends to manifest is with a physical demise and a mental fogginess simultaneously. And we start to feel a little bit overwhelmed, where we look at the task list and instead of it feeling invigorating and inspiring, we look at it and just think, oh, what? I've got to do battle with that. And the minute we're in war mode with our own work or family or those to-do lists, then we're in trouble, because we shouldn't be feeling negatively about where we're about to invest our energy. So that's the start point. From that sort of battle zone, fogginess and overwhelm and anxiety start to become all pervasive. And we might be putting our keys in the fridge, or we might be at the point of feeling anxious about how we're going to show up at work. And we may be unable to sleep because we're feeling that sort of insomniac panic. And we're just sliding into a mental malaise where we
mm,
just start to feel unable to cope. And then this all starts to descend down into then physical dis-ease, where we've been in such a permanent state of cortisol, high cortisol, adrenaline. We're in that stress state that our nervous system starts shutting down. And
yeah.
eventually we get to a place of illness, and potentially for a very long time, because we are dis-eased. And how that manifests can be with me, total immune collapse. My hair had fallen out. I was like a skinny wisp of a woman. I had conjunctivitis, bronchiolitis, tonsillitis, every itis, because I just had no resistance. And the interesting thing was, when I was in hospital and the doctor said, stop, you need a rest, you are stressed. My reaction was, I'm not stressed. I've got it all. I've got it all. I've got my lovely kids. I've got my business. It's great. I couldn't even see that I was stressed. I just didn't know any better. So it took me a long time to come to terms with that was stress, and that was not
Yeah.
good. And that frenetic productivity was not the dream. It needed to be graceful productivity, which is where I'm at now.
Yeah, so, so true. And, even myself, when I kind of looked back and realized I'd had these burnouts, and again, like illness would come up, and I'd kind of like be really stopped in my tracks where I couldn't work even if I wanted to.
Mm.
The universe was really like, hold your horses, you are going to have that wake up call. And for me in particular, I talk about this a lot in my work, as around nervous system regulation. I
Mm.
didn't know what a regulated nervous system felt like. I hadn't
Yeah.
had that for most of my life, having experienced trauma in my childhood. So for me, that constant go, 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 being in my divine masculine energy, it was so wired and normal for me that it was almost like, what do you mean slow down?
Yeah.
What do you mean have a regulated nervous system? What do
Yeah.
you mean I'm stressed? Like, isn't this normal? Like, isn't this how people are meant to feel?
Exactly.
And then I, obviously had hormone tests. I had really dangerously high prolactin. I had high cortisol. And I was like, oh, so this wired feeling I have all the time is not normal. Like all these things. And, it was so interesting because I think some people can almost experience it. And then, for me, that in nervous system work, there's like down regulating and up regulating. And this was such an eye opener for me because I realized that when I get into those places of burnout, I down regulate. So I
Mhm.
don't want to message people back. I become so passive. I just am like coping, just trying to be quiet. And
Yeah.
to me, I'm like regulating, but I'm not. I'm down regulating. And I need to up regulate to get into that regulated space. So I
Mhm.
think it's so interesting how it shows up differently for everybody because
Yeah.
I didn't even have the vocabulary to know how to be regulated, how to not be burnt out almost.
Yeah.
So then when you
Exactly.
have your own business and it's almost like a kid in a candy store where you're like, how many things can I do? What can I launch? What can I birth? How
Exactly.
many books can I write? For me, it was almost like I had to do all that stuff to realize yeah, that's not healthy, Emma. That's not sustainable. And that's
Yeah.
not actually aligned abundance either because you're going to be stressed, you're going to be unwell, and that's not you at your best either?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, we don't get taught at school, we don't get taught that your life is going to expand, whether
Mm,
it's having more friends or more responsibility in terms of your home. You're going to have to learn DIY, you're going to have to learn how to cook, you're going to have to learn how to manage a mortgage, perhaps. You're going to have to be financially independent, you're going to have to learn how to run a business. You're going to keep studying, learning, expanding, 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 potentially having family. And nobody teaches us that at some point you sort of have to go, okay, well, I'm not going to do all of that all by myself and assume that that's normal. But we have to build
mm,
strategies around how we direct our attention subjectively so that it's not just us being sucked downstream reactively, which is what we see all too often. And those statistics around burnout are just that. But it's interesting that also if we're ambitious, you clearly are, I clearly am, we want to be having impact and we want to be doing work that shines in the world. And we have to become very conscious that it's up to us to architect the plan of how
mm.
we are going to manage our impact in the world. And the work that I teach is very much around honoring your bio individuality. As you talk about down regulating and up regulating, if we think about stress, each and every one of us is going to respond differently to stress. And there'll be different stimulus that will create different chemical responses in our bodies. And each and every one of us is utterly beautifully unique. So, assuming that what your best friend is doing to make herself feel zen will work for you is a nonsense. And just because the world has normalized coffee drinking, for instance, I can't drink it. It really destabilizes
Yeah,
me.
same.
So we need to do the work to really self discover.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same, Bianca. I had to quit caffeine, I had to quit alcohol, like
Yeah.
everything that was that almost overstimulant. But one question I actually want to ask you is something I get asked a lot from women with ADHD or autism. They're on the spectrum. How does burnout affect people on the spectrum in different ways?
That's not an area that I've worked specifically in, but it's interesting because somebody talked about this the other day as well. So, when I've worked in the corporate world, where I've been for the past 13 years, there's been a lot more awareness of neurodiversity. And I actually recruited a woman who worked in my last role most recently, who was so brilliantly neurodiverse in terms of the output of work and how she impacted the business. I just said, I wish I could employ an entire team like you, please. She was just magnificent. But I think for anyone with a neurological condition, the same rules apply. It's about understand your own energy. That's where I
Mm,
always start with ensuring that we thrive and can self-sustain. We start by understanding our natural energetic patterns. So we have to go within to build a relationship with a natural harmonic energy state. So our homeostatic state is what our body desires. We are always coming back into homeostasis. Our body, our physical body, wants peace. So if we can support it in coming back into that peaceful state, then we're giving ourselves the best chance. And anyone who is mentally overstimulated and experiencing too much up here-ness, too much
mm,
being in the mind, needs to get down into the body. because the minute we get down into our physical selves, and we can do that through breath work, we start to settle the nervous system, as you know, as you well know, and it starts to soothe ourselves, and that is the place we want to be to ensure that we're making safer life decisions and
Yeah.
having impact that will last.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about the common myths around burnout. So what are some of these common myths that you wish more people understood isn't true?
Well, the one I said earlier about it's not about doing it all to have it all, that is absolutely wrong. But I'm also seeing a lot of blame,
Mm,
especially in the corporate world, where there's a lack of self agency, where people will assume it's the boss's fault, or it's the company's fault, or perhaps at home it's your partner's fault. There's a lot of blame. And the only way to combat burnout is to go within and to take self accountability, to be self directed, to become self aware to the place where you can have that lovely self leadership that enables and empowers you to thrive. So that's what frustrates me the most. And the work that I'm doing with large organizations like Amazon or Google, I'm coming in to just teach the workforce that there's no point pointing fingers, that we are autonomous beings. And as far as we can, it's up to us to step into a space of being able to thrive and deliver the work remits that we have to.
And I think a lot of it is boundaries as well. I know within myself that, as an ex people pleaser, I know a lot of my past burnouts have been because I've tried to do it all. I want to please everybody. Like I had all these things to do. So I feel like, again, there's such big
Mm.
boundary work here, isn't there? Of knowing yourself up, but also, again, looking at if it is people pleasing, if it is doing, whatever you're overcommitting to, do you need to overcommit it? Like, where are you letting that boundary down, or where are you overcommitting yourself because you think someone's going to be disappointed, or like what's the story, what's the narrative behind that overcommitting? Because I
Absolutely.
found myself, like, there's been so many stories over the years where when I really check in with myself, I'm like, yeah, you could have easily have blamed so and so or that person, but actually, Emma, you're still saying yes to that. You are still allowing that. You are still choosing that
Exactly.
every time you were saying yes to it. So it
Very
really is
true.
that self-empowerment of your choice as well.
Absolutely. And if you think about that example I gave earlier with the childcare, I had this warped belief because I felt I would be letting my mum down if I wasn't being the parent that she'd been. And so I had this wonky relationship between how I was as a worker, and I thought it was normal to start work when I'd put the children to bed and then work all through the night. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just bonkers. But I felt if I had childcare, I'd be failing. And so I had to really do the work to understand, hang on a minute, what's my value set? And this is what it all comes back down
Mm.
to. What are our values? And when we're really clear on what those values are, we're able to set the boundaries that honor them. And for me, that was recognizing I love work. I'm going to achieve success,
Mm.
but it's okay for the children to be cared for now and then so that I can sleep, because then I'm going to be a better mother and a better role model. But that was a huge, huge exercise that I had to go through to sort of unpeel layers of where are these wonky beliefs that are keeping me trapped. And then
Mm.
once I did that work and have upheld it, I really, really understood that connection between honoring values and fulfillment. Because when we are living in congruence with what we value, life's easy and we're always fulfilled.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right on the values front, because I realized in my own journey when I then valued peace over productivity, or peace over
Mhm.
whatever it is, now for me, it's a non negotiable of if it's not bringing me peace, like I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Period, full stop. And, even in seasons of my life, like right now, I'm planning a wedding, I've launched my book. Like, I don't know what made me think last year that was a good idea. I really don't know. But in these moments where I'm like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed here. I'm feeling like there's a lot on my plate. even now I can still navigate busyness and busier seasons in such a healthier way because of that value of peace. Whereas before, I would have just run myself into the ground. I would have done it all, been it all, not asked for help, all of that. So I think it's definitely when you know your goal of that peace or that joy or that happiness, whatever the emotion is, that is your driving force of, okay, I'm witnessing, I'm feeling overstressed, I'm feeling overstimulated, I'm feeling burnt out. What is my priority here? It's peace. Okay, how do I get back on track with that? And it's so important to have that goal so you can check yourself, you can check in and catch yourself before you do get to those places where it feels like you can't get out of that burnout. But for anybody listening, Bianca, who's listening to this and it's like, this all sounds good, like I'm definitely in that place you both are talking about, what are some first steps that people can take if they are feeling stuck in the hustle and can't see a way out of this at the moment?
So it always starts with energy. It's the first strategy in my book. It starts with energy. And it's about you starting to really evaluate your own relationship with energy. Because let's be clear, the fact is, we've got the potential within to create this fountain of energy to do all the stuff that we want. And one of the most common complaints in my clinic, I run a burnout clinic, is I don't have enough energy. So, what that tells us is that energy is being misdirected, or there's a dependence on relying on fake energy rather than rejuvenating.
Mm.
So, it's about understanding what are the things that are creating energy and what are things that are depleting it, whether it's people, places, tasks, and look at your life in terms of proportionality. If you're spending a high proportion of your time in environments or doing work that really depletes you, and that you are robbing Peter to pay Paul by relying on fake energy through energy drinks or whatever it might be, caffeine, stimulants, then that's not healthy. If you are in a realm where your work inspires you, your work environment inspires you, the people that you're with inspire you, funnily enough, you will find that you're abounding with energy. So the first exercise is to really just look at what depletes and what creates energy for you specifically. And I have a scorecard, a harmonic energy scorecard in my book where we actually output a map. And that map gives us a guide. And none of it is rocket science. None of it. It just evaluates sleep, relationship with fake energy, learning how to relax. A lot of women I interviewed for the book laughed when I asked how they relaxed. Or I got lots of answers about performative relaxation, like, wow, I listen to my favorite podcast while I'm ironing the sheets or what
Yeah.
have you. So it's about understanding where energy is going. And that's the sort of real physical, mental, emotional understanding of self that can be incredibly powerful in addressing to start mitigating against burnout.
Mm. And I've heard that productive rest all of the time from people myself when people are like, oh, yeah, I do this while I'm doing this. So I do this. And I'm like, hang on a minute. Where's the actual rest? Like, what type of rest is this? Because it's not that, like you say, that fill your cup restorative rest. It's still productive rest. So I think
Yeah.
it is so important to define what that rest is. And you're so right in terms of your energy takers and your energy givers, because like I've never been someone who was reliant on caffeine in the morning. I never used to drink it that early anyway. But one of the things I always get asked whenever I'm with a new group of people or I'm somewhere and they're like, but how do you have so much energy in the morning? Like, I don't have energy until I have my morning coffee. Like, how are you so awake right now? And I don't even think about it. But then I think, well, actually, yeah, how am I so awake right now? And it is, like you say, that passion, that really focusing on what's giving us energy, restorative sleep, self-care, looking after yourself. So yeah, now I don't need any of that. I never drink energy drinks. I don't drink any of
Yeah.
that crap because for me, I
Good.
know it's not good for my body. And I, again, have caffeine sensitivities, so I can't have it. But
Yeah.
equally as well, I don't need it. Like it is, there are those natural energy stimulants, as we know,
Yeah.
from purpose, from, even getting a good night's sleep, from keeping yourself hydrated, even
Yeah.
simple things like iron for me. I've always been really pretty much on the borderline anemic. So even making sure my iron is topped up and I'm, supplementing and
Yeah.
supporting my health, huge
Amazing.
difference in my energy. So there's
Yeah.
so many things like you say of like, are you supporting your body? Are you supporting your health? Are you supporting all of those things before
Yeah.
you're turning to, your favorite cup of coffee in the morning? Because there's nothing wrong with it, but
No.
equally, you can't rely on it, can you?
No, exactly. And society's really normalized that dependence, normalized this state of freneticism, and normalized, don't worry, have a pick me up, rather than go within and
Yeah.
understand what you need and what your natural physical balance looks like. Because I don't believe there's ever going to be balance in terms of life. There's always going to
Mm.
be busyness in terms of the different dimensions of life needing extra focus or energy or attention at different times. But physically, our bodies are always driving us towards balance.
Mm. I love that. I love that. So, I would love to know, Bianca, how do you personally protect your energy and time on a daily basis? Are there any rituals or boundaries you swear by?
I'm very, very invested in breath work. So every morning I will follow a specific ritual that I've learned through a lady called Dr. Sue Morter. And I do all sorts of kind of stretchy poses and I bring divine breath into my body. And I'm really rigorous about that. And so I do that every morning. I start every morning with a pint of hot water with a fresh lemon squeezed in it while I'm doing my breath work. And then I do tarot cards, actually. I do my little spread in the morning before anyone else is up or before I've even taken my pajamas off. That's the way I start my day. And then I just feel grounded into the day. And I'll do that breath work throughout the day, especially if I start to feel triggered or niggled. I'm a great believer that triggers are our growth moments, and leaning into them is very important. So if I feel triggered or uncomfortable, I will really take the time to step out of whatever I'm in, make space for myself to go within, to do the breath work, and journal generally if I'm really in a swirl, and journal through it and try and stabilize my nervous system and examine what's going on. So, and exercise. I run and run and run. I love running outside with my dog, running in my gym, in my garage, which is a treadmill in my garage. And yeah, they're my special things. And I don't have alcohol, caffeine, and try to avoid sugar and grains.
Yeah, sugar's one of those things. Like, I try to get better with it, but I'm like, oh God, like there's sugar in so many things, isn't
I
there?
know. I know, but you know, when you get really clean, and you're probably like this, so when your diet's really pure and clean and chemical free, if you suddenly then have a sugary dessert, I wake up the next day like I've got a hangover with
Yeah.
bloodshot eyes, and I really notice it. Are you the same?
100%, 100%. Like, if I kind of have that cheat day where I'm like, have that full fat Coke or like have that dessert, have that really thing. And I do allow myself those things, of course. But
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. I crash. I have those sugar crashes.
Mm.
And I'm like, how can I have these like massive highs and massive lows? But like you say, when you do eat clean and you kind of,
Yeah.
90% of the time stay like away from sugar as much as you can, like you are going to have that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Fascinating. Really fascinating.
So, Bianca, I would love to know, what does abundance mean to you today and how is it reflected in your lifestyle and decisions?
Oh, I love this question. I think abundance really is about joyfully trusting that there is enough, and living from a place of abundance is just gorgeous and magnificent and fun and joyful. And I love the work that you're doing, especially talking about aligned abundance, because it really is the heart and soul of joy. So I'm very abundant in every which way, and I think it does come back down to love and joy and being loving. And if you have an abundantly loving heart, all the problems kind of melt away, and it's a wonderful space to be in.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, an extra bonus question for you, Bianca. I would love to know if you could go back in time and have a conversation with the version of yourself who's, feeling at their worst. They're in that cycle of burnout. They've been told by the doctor, you need to remove this stress. What advice would you give her?
I would really invite her. Well, it goes back to the myth: stop doing it all.
Mm.
Stop doing it all. Just build a plan. And I'd also say go to sleep.
Just
Go
sleep.
to sleep. Because I grew up in the 80s where it was work hard, play hard. There was such a disdain for sleep in me, all my wonky belief systems. So I didn't think sleep was necessary or cool, and I didn't revere it. And I now absolutely revere it, not only from a physiological restoration perspective, but for tapping into your subconscious and the divine. So, yeah, in fact, that was what I would advise myself: go to sleep.
I love that. I love that. So, my last question to you today, then, Bianca, is what is one piece of life advice that you would like to leave my lovely listeners with?
The magic is you.
Mm.
The magic is you. You have all the answers within, and trust yourself and explore the miracle that you hold within you, because you really are the magic.
Yes, love that. You are the magic. So powerful. Well, Bianca, where can everybody find you if they want to learn more about you or your book?
Thank you so much. So my website, biancabest.com, has all the information around my business, and I'm very active on LinkedIn, learning to be active on all the other channels, learning TikTok, watch this space. I'll have to learn lessons from you, Emma. And I write a weekly newsletter that really inspires ways to capture the joy in life and ensure that work is filled with grace. So you can subscribe on my website, and that would be my pleasure.
Love that. And we will put a clickable link to Bianca's work below so you can access all of that with ease. But thank you so much, Bianca, for coming on today. I have absolutely loved our conversation. I've learned so much from this. And it's just such an important conversation because so many of us experience burnout in big degrees, in small ways. And I think it's just such a needed conversation to get people checking in with themselves, reconnected back to themselves. So thank you so much for sharing all that you have today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really, really been a pleasure. Thank you.